We are live.
Well, hello.
Hello.
You want to?
Yes. We're starting a little early this evening.
And I had no idea until 2 minutes ago.
So forgive me. It's all my fault. But we are here. It is Thursday night generational change. And
I'm having to figure out if our guest can come on now.
Our guest will come on.
Well, I don't know because I had told her 9:15. Like,
hey, look, if we have to stretch it out a little further, and if that means 8:45 instead of, just say if we have to stretch it, then we stretch it. It happens, and it's my fault. So I take responsibility. I thought I confirmed with you. I'm pretty sure.
Unfortunately for you all, he's not sitting here at 52 years old without an ounce of makeup on his face. So it's extremely frustrating.
I don't know. I think
you know what? Please spare me.
I don't even think we're going to do a show yet.
I honestly feel like walking away right now. So anyway.
Well, we hope you're all doing well. Yeah, this is not going to be easy to do if that's how it's going to be. I'd like to do a show. Would you like to do a show?
I was wanting to do the show at 9, which is when I thought it was. So yes, we're going to do the show now.
It's my apologies.
Yes, I know.
I wanted to bring it back a little earlier. And if we have to, like I said.
Yeah, I'm giving him a hard time.
No, it's all my fault. I started this show early. I had messaged everyone that it was starting early, but should have confirmed it more effectively. I'm a busy beaver, and sometimes things slip.
Well, hopefully she can get on.
Okay. And that's, and again, that's on me. That's my apologies.
Good. When she gets on, you can apologize. Hopefully,
yes,
and as somebody who works, I'm sure she is put together because she works during the day.
Yes. And again, we are having a very important conversation this evening regarding our current governor's decision to basically whitewash Black history in the state of Florida.
It's a problem.
For public education. That's only going to get worse as we go forward. Do we have an opportunity to fight back? That is going to be the question. And so we'll see what ultimately ends up panning out. But obviously we have a number of topics that we can cover. Yes, and please lay it at my feet.
I don't need to lay it at your feet. She'll tell from looking at me.
Okay. Well, no. Again, my apologies. I decided, and I thought we agreed that we were going to do the show at 8 tonight instead of 9. Every once in a while, we do come on a little bit earlier. I thought I had.
We won't be doing that again. The only time I really go earlier is for Steve or Jordan, which is the only time really. Everyone else, honestly, if you can't have 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, sorry, unless you're across the pond, and that's a whole different story.
Maybe. Yeah, that's fine. For like Kaepernick and individuals like that.
Yes, but this is not, yeah. So.
Yes. Well, like I said, it's been a crazy work day for me. I probably wouldn't be too good to start at 9 anyway. I've been going since 6:30 this morning. So it's been an eventful day, a productive day, I would say. Had a very good lunch meeting with a potential new client. We'll see what that materializes into. One can be as optimistic as anything, especially in this economy that we're living in today.
Did you email the link to who I told you to?
Yes, it should have come from Colin.
Yes.
Yes.
But from our account.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And if not, I will send that to her right now just in case. But again, like I said, I'm pretty sure that we got it there. But I know Colin did. If she doesn't recognize that email, then I'll make sure it comes from us. And again, that's on me.
Oh, so it's from from us or from him?
The email for the link should have come from Colin.
Okay.
Also, some news. We have our confirmed interview. This one is going to be in the afternoon because it's the only time that they are available to do it. Nevertheless, on Monday, October the 2nd, we will be interviewing Andrew Yang and Stephen Marsh to talk about their book, The Last Election. So that will be at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And that was obviously what worked for Mr. Yang's schedule. So I hope that's enough advance notice.
Well, yeah, that's notice.
2 weeks, just making sure.
A lot better than 2 minutes.
And again, I apologize. So yeah, with that said, that's what we have coming up. We don't have anything set in stone. We're kind of winging it right now. We've got, as we discussed, a lot going on, but obviously a lot of topics to cover tonight. And our guests are going to be here in the next 5 minutes, so it would probably make sense to wait to cover our 2 stories until after our conversation. So let me check real quick.
And what stories are we covering?
We will be covering the UAW interview, Shawn Fain, that Jordan did with Status Quo News the other day. Very important stuff that he covered. And John Fetterman in terms of what he's been up to lately. So I'm going to forward this link right now to Cheryl, just in case. Let's see.
So apparently Chuck Schumer was able to appoint a joint chief, so that's nice.
Yes.
There's still like hundreds of positions that are being like
withheld.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because of, Butterville or whatever his name is.
Tommy Tuberville.
I think it's Tuberville.
Tuberville?
I think.
Well, it would be just like him to call himself Tuberville and not Tuberville.
Well, he's a total POS.
Well, yeah, but there's always a rotating villain. Isn't that how it works in politics?
Well, for people who are not aware, Senator Tuberville from Alabama is holding up hundreds of military appointments because he doesn't think that women should have bodily autonomy. And so because of that, he's holding up all these appointments, but apparently they're able to get them through individually, which of course will take forever. So they were at least able to get through a joint chiefs of staff. The fact that one senator has this much control over, how is this not a threat to national security to not have people secure in military positions? Like, I don't understand. Like, aren't these supposed to be like the real military people?
Yeah.
Why would we want to not have people in those positions?
But if it was such a serious problem, don't you think that they would be making a more concerted effort to ensure that it gets done instead of having one person just hold things up?
I just think it's absurd to me. Just like when people were blaming everybody from, the parliamentarian to Cinema to Manchin for things happening, why our president can't get anything done. So it's amazing how just at certain times, certain people seem to just have all the power. I don't understand it. I don't understand how one person is holding up hundreds of people's lives and national security because he doesn't think I should have bodily autonomy.
Yeah. I think that
people of Alabama, and I know I have no room to talk because really Rick Scott is one of our senators, but
Sure.
People of Alabama, this is not someone who's concerned about your well-being.
Yeah, but I think most people know that and know that the game is set up so that way you can't succeed. I just think a lot more people are becoming aware of that now, more so than they've ever been aware of it before. It's not like we're in a situation where all of a sudden people are shocked that we have a government that doesn't represent people. It's like, and we'll get into it later, but right now they're creating a crisis on Capitol Hill because Senator John Fetterman doesn't dress appropriately. And because
he doesn't.
Does that define how he governs?
No, but I like, honestly, this is one of those things where two things can be true. Like, sure. I definitely don't think how John Fetterman dresses is of any real importance in terms of like how it affects people. But I too think that there are better ways to dress professionally in a professional environment. So like for me, I think that, you know, he could do better. But, you know, do I think that that's like something we should be discussing or it's newsworthy when thousands of people are missing in a flood in Libya? No, I don't. I don't think that Fetterman's clothes are worth discussing when there's like catastrophes everywhere.
Well, speaking of catastrophes, the state of Florida knows no limit in terms of how far we're willing to stretch the what would you call it? Anti-intellectualism? Is that
well, he calls it anti-woke, but that's it's you know, it's basically we are pro-dumb. We're pro-dumb.
You know, one of the best leaders, forget presidents, one of the best leaders we ever had was General Eisenhower. And when he oversaw the liberation of Dachau, which was one of the most bloody, you know, concentration/extermination camps during the Holocaust of World War II, he specifically said, take all the pictures you want, take all the video you need, because there will come a point at some point down the line where someone is going to say loud and proud that this never happened. And this is sort of the same thing about rewriting history right now. In terms of the treatment of many different cultures, but specifically in Florida, the treatment of Black Americans, there is this desire to sort of whitewash its history so that way it can be surmised, not now, but maybe a generation from now, that what has actually happened didn't actually happen.
Yeah.
Because of how the history books are being written.
Well, we've had that anyway for a while here. Like, to me, it's always been bad because the amount of things that I realize every day that I should have known but didn't know is just, it's flooring, really. So now, and they want to make it worse because now we're apparently PragerU constitutes appropriate learning.
Couldn't pick a better time to have this conversation.
Yes.
And without further ado, we are pleased to welcome. Well,
here's what's funny. So honestly, I was going to introduce CJ as CJ at Staples is the lead organizer for Dream Defenders down here in South Florida. But now I know that his name is Carnell, but I did not know this. So I did. Hey, he has this on his own LinkedIn.
Well, if it's on LinkedIn, then it's official. So there you go.
We're going to welcome Carnell Staples, lead organizer at Dream Defenders. And then this is really cool because everyone knows my friend Mona Lisa, and you know I've talked about her a lot. But this is somebody that I met through her, and Cheryl Irvin is the director and owner of a K-8 program in Broward that is Afro-centered learning. It's a private program, so this is someone who doesn't have to deal with the curriculum that we're being handed down. So. Ms. Irvin, welcome to Generational Change. CJ, welcome.
Oh, I'm back to CJ now. Thanks.
Now you're CJ. Now you're here, you're CJ. I was like,
formal introduction and formal conversation.
What is it?
Nobody called me Carnell.
But you have it on your own LinkedIn. It wasn't like I called your mama and she told me your secret name and I'm outing you.
And who is the next guest? Because usually we have Lou, but we see a little furry friend who is.
Oh yes, this is Dala Jill.
Hi, we're dog people. Yeah.
She just happens to always want to come around whenever I'm on a call. So
of course,
that's because there's only one person who is allowed attention in this world. You have to understand.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
so, Miss Cheryl, can I call you Cheryl? Can I call you? What is your preferred? Because we don't really know. We don't know each other. Just that we spoke on the phone. I'm Jen.
I'm Cheryl. My
Okay.
government name is Cheryl, and I do put my government name on my LinkedIn. That's CJ, you'll get that. But
And you can forgive me. It is my fault. I had confirmed with CJ. I did not personally confirm with you. I had the email sent out early today that we were going to do 8:15. That's on me.
Don't we normally do 9:15?
Sometimes yes, normally
do you
we
see
do, but
this?
sometimes you look fine.
Yeah. Okay, but this is not normal. Well, you know. But you understand. How would you like that?
Trust me, if she had it,
like that.
trust me, she would have taken a knife to me if she could have. So I apologize. This is on me.
I'm only happy now that you guys are here.
Yes. Well, yeah. Now I'm safe for the next 45 minutes to an hour. So I feel good about that.
But welcome, you guys. So CJ, do you remember when we were at that event the last time? I think I saw, maybe a couple of times ago, in Miami, and it was that event at that really cool historic church. I cannot remember. I'm sure. Again, I don't do the 305 very often. And one of the things that we were talking about was at that time, that was when DeSantis basically said, okay, the AP course can't be taught here. Like that's when that sort of came down. And I said to you something of, I really wish there was a way for us to offer this to people outside of the program and how important that is. And so that was why I wanted to include you in this conversation. And then I found out that my friend Mo, you know Mo.
I know Mo, yeah.
Okay. So that this is where her nephew goes to school. So I was really happy to find out about this. So if you could, Ms. Cheryl, talk about your program before we start getting into like the problems of what we're not getting in our public program.
okay. So I'm just going to tweak the languaging a little bit. We are an African-centered, project-based kindergarten through 12th grade private school.
Okay.
It's not a program. We are a registered private school with the state of Florida. You can go to the Florida Department of Education and research us and find us there. So we are a registered private school with the state of Florida.
How do you pronounce it?
Alkebulan. New Alkebulan STEM Education Center. So if you did want to look us up, that's where you would find us. New Alkebulan STEM Education Center. So the word Alkebulan is just Alkebulan means Africa. It means the continent of Africa. It's just an older word than the word Africa for the continent. So we use the word that is a little bit older. That's it. So we are an African-centered, project-based private school here in Broward County. And by African-centered, we pretty much center the children and their history, their heritage, their culture, in everything that we do. And people always ask, does that mean that they don't actually learn American history and they don't actually learn world history? To which I kind of smile, because their history is American history and it is world history. So that part, it's just that when they study from their own vantage point. It's sort of like when they say if you get in a car accident on the corner, you have someone standing north, south, east, and west, and southeast, and all of these different, and they're all going to get a different vantage point of the happening. Well, we study all of the happenings from what would have been their lens had they been there. And it's not that they don't study the happening, they don't study the occurrences. They simply study it from, if I was there, what would I have experienced and what would this look like to me? Now let me step outside of myself and see what the other person was thinking and feeling and what this other person was thinking and feeling. And now we get a panoramic view of the situation. But I start with me. Why not?
No, I agree. I think, and obviously everything here is so Euro-centered, so white-centered, and everything is through that lens. I mean, I think Zinn should be required reading in high school. And that's essentially what you're talking about, is that's the different lens. It's from the perspective of the other that we've always othered. And yeah, so CJ, talk, if you can, I mean, I know you're familiar with what's going on here. Talk a little bit about what is going on with this new state, like what they're wanting to add to the curriculum. Because that's, to me, what it is. They're adding things. They're not really taking things. They're adding things.
Yeah, I mean, like you mentioned before, I mean, Prager used kind of the template that they're using, and yeah, I think it's accurate to call it an addition, because while they are not necessarily denying that's the enslavement of Africans happened in this country. The addition is that, oh, there were benefits, or oh, that was just the way of the world at the time, and that people just kind of accepted that because of the status quo. And I think that something really interesting about framing it that way and trying to create that narrative is that it actually it dehumanizes and dismisses the actual enslaved people, right? When you have a population of enslaved people that actually matches the non-enslaved people, and you're saying that a majority of the people who lived in this country were for slavery, or felt like that was something that just was a way of life. It's saying, okay, well, how did the people who were actually enslaved feel about their situation? So it really just erases the humanity of the individuals that were actually enslaved. So I think that, and I mean, I'm sure you've seen, the PragerU videos where those kids are going back in time and he talked to, Frederick Douglass and Abraham Lincoln. And you're just like, guys, this is absolutely not how he would have expressed it. Maybe Abraham Lincoln had his own thoughts about, enslaved people and Africans at the time. But yeah, from the perspective of someone who was a former slave, or descendants of former slaves, the atrocities have never truly. And I mean, I went to school in New Jersey, K through 12, even though I did spend a couple of years in South Florida in elementary school. Most of my childhood was educated in New Jersey. And even though it was a far more advanced educational system up in New Jersey during that time, the extent of what enslaved individuals went through those 400 plus years has never really been fully fleshed out in primary and secondary schools. So the additions of it being a happy time, a time of skill building, and it allows for them to acknowledge a thing while still erasing the negatives of that thing.
I just got to answer somebody in our chat. Metalopoly, I understand it's all the same history. It's just not the same perspective of that history. That's the point. Yes, the facts are facts. Things that happened are things that happened. They happened no matter what color anyone was. That's what happened. But the perspective of it and how it's taught is what we're talking about. So yes, that's why we're saying it's the same history. Agreed. They're not segregating their history. I don't mind. We have some conservatives in our chat for,
And that's okay.
Yeah, no,
and that's okay. Because some of them, from their perspective, they really don't understand.
no.
And they really don't understand why the need to what they think is changing the history. Why do you need to change the history and make it African? And again, you're not changing the history. You're simply saying, from your vantage point, sitting on the porch, you may have seen things that way. You may have actually looked, and when I say you, I mean the people who look like you, the people who are in your ancestral bloodline, the people who came before you. They may have actually said, or felt this is kind of how it is now. This is the time that we're in. There may have been, if there was not that conscious conversation, there may have been their subconscious feelings about it. Like that's just, that's just how things are. This is who they are. But now, if you can take a moment and step off of the porch and imagine that you are one of those people in the field. Imagine that you are one of those people in the field in, let's not say cotton, let's say another one of the agricultural foods that you can actually eat as you pick it. But
Right.
if you eat it while you're picking it, there's someone on a horse with a whip that is going to punish you for doing so, even though you are malnourished, because you don't get to eat and your family doesn't get to eat. And they're checking you to see if you squirreled any of the food away, because it is more valuable to be sold and not to actually be given to you and your family to eat. Step off of the porch for a moment. Put yourself in the field. Now from that lens, what are you seeing? What are you looking at? How do you feel? What is your perspective and your vantage point? If you're
Yeah.
willing to do that, then we can have a conversation. If you're not even willing to do that, and your conversation is going to be had from the porch, while my conversation is being had from the field, there will be no understanding between us because we're not looking at the same thing. Because the happening is happening, but it's
Yeah.
not happening to you if you're on the porch.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
Very well
I think
said.
that, and that's the key thing. And I didn't learn, unfortunately, until college, really, that history is written from the perspective of the victor. History
Absolutely.
is, and the oppressor. And, yeah, I don't know, I was like 19 maybe, and I sort of had like the epiphany that, and then of course it made logical sense. And of course that's how that would happen. And now I see it, but this has such big impacts. Like we're looking at it now from this political vantage point of, DeSantis and Republicans, but the Democrats, like we're looking at it from political, but that's not really like to me what matters the most. And that's something I wanted to ask you, CJ. Like you're somebody, when you do on the ground organizing and the people that you work with in vulnerable communities, because, that's what we're talking about here. What you see, I cannot imagine is not that it's not connected to people's lack of education about their history and their perspective. Like what does that do? For people growing up, it's like, I think that that's one of the biggest problems it has on communities is the lack of the education about history.
Absolutely, and it actually goes a lot deeper than I'm sure that you even you're asking, because I mean, and thankfully for Ms. Irvin to have the institution that she has, because and you've seen this throughout history, recent history, right? Like when we're all getting the same education, that indoctrination and the white supremacist thinking goes across the board, right? Like the same way that you'll have individuals say, that may be white and say like, oh, slavery wasn't that bad, or we're all past it, we need to move on. There are people within the Black community that say the same thing, right? There are people within the Black community that don't understand the origins of police in this country. And because of it, the protect and serve element of law enforcement is lost on them. They don't understand the origins. They don't understand what they were actually designed to do. So yeah, when a population is educated or indoctrinated from a white supremacist or white nationalist lens, you have the effects are, you have one group of people who believe that they're superior, and then you have the other group of people who believe that not only are they inferior, but they aspire to become just like their oppressors, which is why you have Black-owned businesses, Black entrepreneurs who are just as exploitative as white entrepreneurs, which is why we've had Black slave owners, even then, right? So it's all, when you, like I said, you're talking about perspective. You all have to understand that when you have hegemony that is centered around whiteness, and everyone is looking for this standard of whiteness, and what is deemed good is being white. It is not just the white people in that community that are feeling as though they have to aspire, and they're proud of that. You have those who are not white that are aspiring to get that same level of privilege, and ultimately that'll never happen.
Yeah, it's there. Well, the truth is if you grew up in this country, they were brainwashed by the same indoctrination, right? Like if you went to public school, you got the same indoctrination. And Cheryl, we had talked about, and I do have the actual thing pulled up in Google Docs, like if you know the specific, like the sections of this new curriculum, but I just want to, like, there were 2 points that I know I've seen that the majority of people are making a big deal out of. Well, I don't know, but just wait. Yeah. And usually that is not, like, when I see people making a big deal out of 2 out of like thousands of things, I have to wonder what else is obviously horrible in there. But the 2 main points that people are having real issue with are the obvious, that they've added to the curriculum that students must be taught, and this is high school age, I believe, is what this portion of the curriculum is for, that that the benefits to slavery were that slaves learned valuable skills, right, or trades, or whatever. And then and then the second point that is that, as far as I am aware of, is the complete whitewashing of, and I'm going to butcher it, the with the massacre in Florida.
No, it's not just that one. It's not just that one. There were a list of massacres, to include the Tulsa, Black Wall Street, Rosewood, right here in Florida. There's a list of massacres that it says that they are mandated to teach the violence against and by American Africans during those massacres.
Right.
And those are the 2 main points that people have been most in the news and on social media. I actually brought those points to my students from ages 4 to 15. Every morning we stand in a circle and we open our school day with a lot of different things. It could be praises, it could be different things, it could be current events, whatever. But I brought those 2 points to circle, right? And I read them word for word from the curriculum, and I told them this is the new curriculum standards for social studies that are mandated by the state of Florida. And the first question was, you have to teach us that? And I said, no, it's not that I have to teach it to you. I'm bringing it to you so that we can have a discussion about it. And Jennifer, I'll send you the discussion. It was amazing. Just the thoughts of children. And so we read it, and I asked them, I said, if you were sitting in a classroom, because we don't do that here. We don't have to teach it that way here, but we're going to analyze it, right? But if you were sitting in this classroom and it was incumbent upon you to learn it this way, and it was incumbent upon you to learn it and then be tested on it, and there's a right answer to this test, and you had to write in a certain way in terms of, well, what are the benefits? And you had to list how would that make you feel? What would that make you think? And just what came from these children from 4 to 15 years old was heartbreaking. In terms of, like, what does it do to the community? What does it do to the child, to the mind of the child who is sitting in the classroom in that moment? And they weren't even being taught it. They were analyzing it, and they were very emotional. They were saying that it would make them feel like they were less, that it would make them feel like they couldn't even know for themselves what needed to be done for their community. The last question that I got, though, was People call our school all times of night. I'm sorry. I'm gonna let it ring.
That's okay.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
okay.
I get calls 24 hours a day about the school. But the last question that I got was from the perspective of what they get here. And it was, well, how can you learn skills that you already had when you came from Africa?
Right.
And I said, exactly. Now let's talk about that. And so that when they talk about, well, when we read this book, we learned that were already masters of agriculture. And oh yeah, what about metallurgy? They already knew the science of smelting and making metal. And then the thing that the children in Florida's public schools or wherever they teach that in that way, the thing that they will never know is that your ancestors were not just stolen, they were chosen. And they were chosen because they had those skills. They were chosen because they were masters of agriculture already. They were chosen because they were masters of architecture already. They came here with the skills. And at the end of or the legal end of slavery, they had mastered those skills because of the position that they were put in, and then they used those skills to start to try to build their own communities. That's the part that they will never get. You were masters of those skills before you got here, and that is why you were chosen to be here. Like, if you were running a business and you could make someone work in it, and you had the opportunity to choose a master of the skill or someone who knows it, or someone who has no idea of what they're doing, which one are you going to I'm not going to say the word employ, but which one would you choose? So our students know from reading, from study, from education, all of the things that they already knew prior to getting into the West, either by choice, because we came here by choice, or by force. We already knew these skills. We already had these skills. We just were better at the skills at the end of enslavement because of the situation that we have been put under, and then use them to build our own businesses, to build our own communities, to educate our own children. Like,
Yeah.
and that's the part that when the children in public schools are taught that way, that's the part they'll never know. And that's the part that's left out. Now, if you take that same wording and you just tweak it a little bit, it's not egregious. It's not egregious anymore. When you tweak it a little bit and say that they use the skills that they already had to benefit the communities that they now had the opportunity to build and rebuild, that's different. That is different. And that is different to the mind of the child, to the psychology of the child,
Yeah.
not just the American African children who are sitting in the room, but the children of European descent as well. They don't have to feel bad about that. There's nothing to feel bad about in that, in
Right.
knowing that truth. But now, if you only give them that they were enslaved, they got skills from being enslaved, and now they're better. Oh, well, we helped you. This was helpful.
And that's the whole,
Yeah.
premise of what Governor DeSantis, and granted, it's probably not him. There's probably some conservative coalition that's
A real Mensa think tank, I'm sure.
really like pushing him. And look, if it's Dennis Prager, it wouldn't surprise me in the least. I mean, I've heard that guy's nonsense for the better part of 3 decades. Used to go on regularly on Bill Maher's first show. So this guy's been out there spewing his stuff for a very long time. And the privatization of education in the state, when we open the floodgates for that, it would seem that it's almost inevitable that something like this was eventually going to find its way into that pathway, because ultimately it is all about the privatization of the education system. That's the goal, and that goal is to teach a one size fits all style of education that really benefits, the people at the top that want to rewrite history.
But we have a very cool clip that you had shared with us. So I want to play that. I have this little clip. So tell us what this, because this is your students. You were just talking about your students. And so what did you tell them before you made this video? Like, what was the prompt for this video that they did?
This was actually somewhat of a healing piece. After reading that, after learning that so many children in the state of Florida would be learning in this way, but they don't have the background information that they have as students, they were sad.
Okay, so let's play the CJ.
They were sad, and then so we created this video as a way of saying, don't stay. I know it hurts a little bit, but we don't have to stay there. Get up. Come on, get up.
It's really, it's
quick.
It's quick. It's very quick, guys.
It's effective.
Yeah.
Look at me. What about me would make you think that I care about your opinion of me? Your opinion of me is not the opinion that I have of myself. You ain't make me, so you can't break me. You didn't build me, so you can't kill me.
It's sweet, and they're cute little faces, and I'm very thankful that you are doing what you're doing. Like, seriously, it shouldn't have to be that way. Like, it should just be that everything is sort of taught from the perspective of different people. Like, it just shouldn't be such a fight for people to learn history. Shouldn't be such a fight.
So I want to interject a bit, just because you started talking about the chat, and I looked into the chat, and I was just like,
don't do that. Look away from the chat.
Yeah, you're totally right. But there's a lot of talk about, like, I guess the white guilt that comes from all of what it is that we're talking about, like the true history of this country. And as a man, right? Like, there is a privilege box that I check, right?
Yes.
Right, being a Black man, I am a man, so that privilege of living in a patriarchal society exists. I acknowledge that. Learning about how men have been privileged for the entirety of the U.S. history up until, even now to this day, right, where women make 75 cents to each dollar that a man makes, and women couldn't get credit cards until the 1970s, and they weren't allowed to open up bank accounts, and it's like learning that was done by individuals of my gender does not make me feel like, oh, I'm a piece of crap, right? Like, it makes me say, okay, men have done horrible things and under the banner of patriarchy. And then what it allows me to do is say, okay, well, as a man and as a leader of my community at this point, I'm going to do what I can to now to change the direction of our society in which those ways do not exist anymore. So the idea that, like, every single person that learns about the history of their ancestors automatically goes to guilt and resentment and bitterness and, like, oh, well, we all just suck, when the reality is that, like, some of you do because y'all just can't critically think.
Okay, some of you do.
But some of us actually say, well, because of my ancestors, I'm going to strive to be better. And that's actually the idea. It's funny, right? That's the idea of a progressive. That's literally how progression in a society is supposed to work. You're consistently and constantly better than the generation before you. So, people use the words conservative and progressive very loosely. And I don't really think people understand exactly what it is when they're saying that. Because for me, if I hear someone say that they're conservative, they're saying, okay, I want things to kind of remain the way that they've been for however long they want to say that. But for someone in my position, no, I don't like where Black people are in this country now. I don't like where we were 50 years ago. I don't like where we were 100 years ago. So I'm always going to strive to make today and tomorrow better than yesterday. So just to kind of give whoever was saying whatever about white guilt and black kids aren't going to like white kids because of what they're learning. It's like, no, that's projection. Some of us see that history, learn that history, and decide to be better.
Yeah, I have a couple things to say about white guilt. I think people really have a hard time distinguishing between what guilt is. Words have meaning, okay? So like, I don't have guilt. I don't have guilt. I have a very keen awareness of my privilege. And I have a very, deep desire to understand more and to learn as much as I can and that, but I don't feel guilty, right? Like, so I think that you can be aware of, like what you're saying, of your privilege without feeling like personally responsible for the situation. I am personally responsible for what I choose to do, knowing what I know, but I'm not responsible for what happened, hundreds of years ago, right? So I don't feel guilty, but I feel very conscious.
So when someone dies or you have a tragedy in your life, we all understand this concept called the stages of grief, right? Have you ever heard that concept, the stages of grief? Okay, so there are emotions that you go through before you get to that end stage of a peace, an acceptance, and a peace, right? And so when, because of Black people, a lot of Black people do not know this history either. I will tell you that. And see, CJ shaking his head. The
Yeah.
vast majority of Black people do not know this history either. I could put my 4 years olds up against their grandparents, and
Yeah.
they don't know this history, right? So there are stages of before you just get to awareness and inner peace. And I'm going to do something different as an American African person. When you're learning these things, there are stages. Anger is one of those stages, but you don't stay there. And grief, sadness, crying, like literally crying as you're reading these, those are stages, but you don't stay there. Just like you, if you are grieving someone that died, and that is what we're doing. We're grieving a lot of people that died, but we don't stay there. There are stages of grief, and with the goal of which to get to a place of inner peace and awareness and a moving differently about into life and how you relate to yourself first and foremost and other people. Now, people of European descent in this country, they have their stages of grief as well. They are mourning as well. And guilt is a part of those stages for many of them. Just like anger is a part of those stages for many of us. And there's even a guilt. And I need to write down what the stages are.
Right.
But there's even a guilt for American Africans because a lot of us, as we're reading and we're going over this information, and you're looking at Booker T. Washington, and you're, yes, Booker, but then you're talking about, there's a lot of things that he says. It's like, oh my gosh, it's blowing your mind, and your mind is blown. And your guilt is, why didn't we just leave? Why didn't we just run? Why didn't we just, as a group of us, just rise up and overtake them more? And there are a lot more revolts than people are taught about. But there's a guilt there. So there's anger, there's sadness, there's guilt, there's grief, there's crying, there's all of that. And we allow American Africans to have those stages of grief as they come to their point of wokeness but peace. And we need to allow people of European descent to have that also, because they have their stages of grief as well. But the thing that I really want you to recognize, the people of European descent, right? This is what I want you to recognize, that you're mourning something different. You're mourning a loss that's different. And when you get that, you're mourning a loss of an idea of who you were, and allow yourself that morning, and then come into a reality of who you are and who you can be, then there's that inner peace, and there's peace with other people in that, right? We're mourning the loss of who we were. You're mourning the loss of who you thought you were.
Right. We don't like that our shared
There's a
history is not what we thought it was. A lot of
Exactly.
people can't reconcile that. Like, and I guess for me, like I come from a different, like, I mean, yeah, I'm from European descent, but like as Russian, also Russian Jewish descent. So like my great grandparents were leaving the pogroms in Russia, and their houses and everything were set on fire, and they were escaping coming here. So that has its own set of trauma. But so like my history isn't necessarily like where I thought we had this grandiose, great, thing. I'm not coming at it, but I know a lot of people that have, like, that they are mourning that sort of perspective of, wait a minute, you mean Africans were civilized and we didn't do that for them? And here's the thing is that I'm going through a lot right now as a Jewish, second generation Jew, former Zionist, and realizing a lot of stuff that I participated in and did, and that I feel guilty about. That's my own thing. But like this, what you're talking about, this mourning of what I thought was, I basically learned the Jewish equivalent of, not just Santa Claus isn't real, but he's a mass murderer. You know what I'm saying? So, and I've been dealing with that. There's been a lot of crime. I actually realized very recently that I was used as a tool in ethnic cleansing. Like I actually physically was planting trees in Israel. And I shudder to think of what I was planting over, and I'm like, I was in high school. And it wasn't like now where we had the access to the information, right? Where I could just like see somebody posting something and be like, oh, wait, I didn't see that, right? Like I was very indoctrinated as a Zionist. That's my messed up history story. And like, so I have my own demons that I'm dealing with that, but that's how I sort of equate this, like what we're talking about, like this sort of feeling of like anger. Oh, I'm angry. Actually, though, but I can actually name names. That's the thing, because that's how recent history this is. I can name names of who I am angry at, but like it is a grieving process. You're very right. I want to come to your school. I feel like I might benefit from coming there at circle time anyway, but
just the simple fact that you're not taught in school that the White House and the U.S. Capitol were built by
Black people.
Yeah. And credit to the great miniseries John Adams, which did not shy away from showing that is exactly how it was done. And credit obviously to the Adams family, no pun intended. But they did not. But they are the one founding father presidents that we had, with the exception of I think like 2 or 3 others up until Lincoln that did not own slaves. And setting that foundation, I think, was very important. But you cannot deny that reality. And I think that's the thing that I think a lot of times people have a really hard time understanding is that, yes, the whole evolution of slavery in any form of it that exists today, like wage slavery, which is a real thing.
Prison slavery.
Yeah, prison labor. It's that, but that's what it is. It's prison labor. That's the goal. Slave labor, right. Whatever you want to call it. The goal is for the rich to maintain a strong arm over society through cheap labor or outright slave labor. It's just in a different form. And that's the hard reality that I think a lot of people don't realize. And that's what we strive for constantly when we talk about, when Jen ran for political office, when we do what we do, it's about recognizing that there has to be a working class uprising in this country. And it starts with recognizing our very, poor history, to say the least.
But dumbing it down just makes, like, that's what we're talking, bringing it full circle, right? Like,
you gotta rip the Band-Aid. You gotta rip the Band-Aid.
But it's like, it just keeps perpetuating it when you don't properly educate it.
Right.
So in terms of what you were saying, Connor, is it?
Peter.
I look like a Connor too, I guess.
My apologies. But one of the things that people don't understand or recognize or have been taught is some of the first uprising of enslaved Africans incorporated and included the European indentured servants who were also laboring alongside of them. So it was very much racial, very much racial, but there was a class element to it too.
Yeah.
And they were revolting together. They were revolting together against what you just said. Like there are rich people who will use all of us. And so the idea of whiteness was introduced as a way of separating them from enslaved Africans and giving them it's sort of an artificial status. They didn't get money, but they got an artificial status that separated them from the Africans that were there and dissuaded them from continuing to revolt with them. Because now my whiteness is more valuable than my upward mobility in society, because I am being told that my whiteness is the thing that gives me my upward mobility in society, even though I do still live next to you in the shack next door. So
Yeah,
so what you're talking about is dangerous. What you're talking about is the most dangerous element, right? Where you have people over here and people over here who both realize, hold on a second, we're both kind of being used. How about we join together and tell the people who are using us to go kick rocks, right? That is when Martin Luther King Jr. got killed.
correct.
Well, and we talk
Correct.
about that all the time. We cover labor
That's
issues
what
a lot here. We kind of fluctuate between all different types of
He could
oppressed
talk-
groups, and labor is definitely an oppressed
He
group.
could talk all he wanted about race issues in his country because there was a dividing line. But the second he started talking about a working class uprising, oh no, that ain't happening.
No, it was the poor people.
Correct.
It was the poor people.
They had to make they had to make an example of all of them. They had to make an example of Jack. They had to make an example of Martin. They had to make an example of Bobby, and they obviously had to make an example of Malcolm. That was the shot across the bow to say, if you unite workers, we will kill you. It's that simple.
Literally.
And we're even seeing that like today, right? We're still seeing that today. I mean, every time I go online, and I remember in Florida here, right, when we were fighting for 15, there were so many memes like, oh, well, if a McDonald's burger flipper is making $15 an hour, then what is the paramedic that's making the same amount? What are they supposed to do? And it puts this idea in people's heads that, like, as long as someone is doing worse than me, I'm okay. And that's obviously not like the poor person is not the enemy. The enemy is the person who's been paying the essential workers an unlivable wage, right? The idea that, like, oh, well, you know, McDonald's and Publix, those are all like high school jobs. It's like, wait, so is McDonald's and Publix closed from 8:30 a.m. to 3 p.m.? Like, no. So why would you expect people who are in school during those times to be the only people who work there? And the divide and conquer tactic has been so effective in this country. And the fact that, like, we still have individuals that are literally in the same social class as us, like, fighting with us about the right for billionaires to even exist, is a testament to how impactful and effective that tactic still is to this day. And I, you know, as a community organizer, I struggle on how to get through to people. I mean, relational organizing does do a really good job. You know, it's a one-on-one conversation, asking those kinds of questions that force people to think about why they think the things that they think. And it's going to take a lot more than, you know, the 30 or so members that I have in Broward to really shift the thought, the mindset of our communities. But yeah, I mean, it's so impressive how they've been able to convince poor people that even poorer people are the people you need to be worried about.
It's part of the education problem.
But
it's the same problem.
But this, I think, gets to the heart of why, depending on what happens over the next year, I think Dr. Cornel West's run for the presidency, even though it's being done in the Green Party, could ultimately end up becoming sort of a watershed moment for a lot of people, because he is going to do exactly what you just said. He is going to talk about the plight of people of color in this country, and he's going to meld it together with working class people, which is why his situation is extremely precarious, because he hasn't even gotten started yet. And the amount of vitriol and hate and fear that is being thrown in his direction from the establishment, they know he's a force to be reckoned with. Everyone else is doing their own thing. Is, when they can't, the only way they can slow down somebody like him is to basically take care of him, if you will. And that's what I fear for him, because his voice is so powerful and so important that he is going to have that impact. And when he went on a pretty popular podcast recently, and the guy on the podcast told him, don't talk about the racial issues, just talk about the working class issues. And he's like, I'm going to talk about both because they're connected.
Some of us can walk and chew gum at the same time.
Are you sure about that?
Well, some of us can.
Yes.
Not all content creators are equal.
Well, we're small but mighty, as we often like to say. But we keep it we ground it to the issues that are of the most important of the day. And that is, there is a ruling class and there's everybody else. And those who, like you said, CJ, that think that just because they may be one rung up on the ladder, they can cut that ladder down so quick you couldn't even see it coming. And everything that's been happening over the past few years, I think, is a manifestation of that, which is why people need to embrace what you guys are saying right now, because this is how we get out of this.
I had reached out to, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Marvin Dunn, the professor at FIU. There was a piece on him recently. Did you see that? We reached out to him. I couldn't get, you didn't get a response? And so, no, I know. I just think it's really cool that he's leading tours up to Rosewood. And I just think that he had some really cool points about, what's going on. But what is happening now, Cheryl, with teachers that in public school? I mean, how are they going to be forced to teach that narrative, right? Like, who's going to force them to, how are they going to enforce that narrative?
You enforce a narrative in education through the curriculum material that you give them to teach from. It takes a really creative teacher, and there are so many of them.
That's what I'm hoping.
Outside of the curriculum and add to it and bring in other content and bring in other material, bring in live documents and say, okay, but that takes time, that takes effort, that takes energy, right? So you will have teachers who do that, and you will have teachers who do what we did. Read it exactly as it's read. Now let's add this material to it, and let's add this material to it. Let's have a Socratic circle about all of these documents that we now have in front of us. You will have some teachers who do that. And you will have some teachers who simply use the curriculum material that is provided to them. Because not only is that easier to do, because there's so much to do as a teacher, but because you may not know the information yourself. Not all teachers know what they're teaching, because in the state of Florida, the only thing that you need to be a teacher is a bachelor's degree. You don't need a bachelor's degree in teaching. You don't need a bachelor's degree in education. You simply need a bachelor's degree. So the truth of the matter is, I don't know the percentage, but I'll say 50-50 for sake of not knowing the actual percentages, right? You have a percentage of teachers who love the profession, who feel like that is who they are. I am an educator. They went to school and they got their degree in teaching and education because that's what they intended to do, right? I have a master's degree in education from Stanford University. I have a master's degree in school leadership from the High Tech High graduate school in San Diego. I have about 3 degrees, all in education teaching. That's who I am. That's what I do. But I also have a bachelor's degree in political science. And because I had intended to be an attorney. And that's all it took for me to get teaching credentials in the state of Florida. Any bachelor's degree will get you teaching credentials in the state of Florida. And a lot of people, let's say 50% of them, right? They come out of college, they don't have a job in their chosen profession right away. The easiest thing for you to do with your bachelor's degree is get a temporary teaching certificate that allows you to teach in the state of Florida for 3 to 5 years. And the idea is, okay, I'm going to do that as I get my foothold into my profession, whether that be engineering, whether that be whatever that is, right?
But
So
not teachers.
you have a huge percentage of teachers who never intended to be teachers. It's kind of a pass through, and
Yeah.
then some of them find themselves there for a long period of time, right? So you can have that person with a social studies degree or political science degree who is on their way to being an attorney, who's never taken an African history class, who didn't even take a whole lot of history classes, but end up teaching history in the public school system, because you don't need that much
Right.
to be qualified. You need a bachelor's degree. Period.
So
and
how
let's
do we fix this? This is what I'm sorry, CJ. Like,
And
how
so they're going to get the material that is provided to them by the state of Florida. And whatever that says, those teachers are going to teach that. And
Right.
those students and their classes are going to learn that. And the workbook that comes with it, the testing manuals that come with it, that's what they will get. And then you're going to have those teachers, like I said, who are like, this is what I do. I'm analyzing this. Let's have my students analyze. You're going to have that
You're
too.
right, 50-50.
But I'm going to be generous and say 50-50.
Right, because we know that we all went to school. We had some good teachers and we had some crappy teachers, and that's just how it goes. But I feel like there's got to be a way to subsidize this. I almost feel like, CJ, that's what I was going to say to you. Like, as an organizer, like, what kind of things can like we do in an organizing way, in a grassroots way, so that people have access to accurate education outside of public schools, because that's who needs it.
I mean, yeah, it's like that's been, our challenge, right? We the Broward Squad, we work very closely, or we've worked very closely with Emmanuel George, with the Old Dillard Museum, providing tours and educate Black Broward education to whoever, right? And completely free, right? Like it's it's on our dime. We'll provide whatever funds needed to make sure that everyone can come, and it's open to as many people that would like to. But it also requires the community kind of putting that word out and having making it a priority, because of what it is that they're forcing us to learn and be taught in these schools, to seek true education elsewhere, right? Because our events, they can be, weekday evenings, weekends.
We need to have a series. I think we need to create a series and bring in people like Cheryl and get people who might come in and do some volunteer work for kids that aren't having access. I think we should create some sort of educational series, like in Broward or something.
Yeah. No, there definitely needs to be a collaboration with community organizers and educators, and that was something that we had kind of gotten the ball rolling on at the beginning of the year with all of the walkouts and the teach-ins in response to the anti-woke and CRT bashing kind of thing that the DeSantis and his cronies were putting out there, where it's like, hey, we understand people don't have the capacity, right? I think when you talk about, Cheryl, when you talk about the 50-50, I think there's another percentage of individuals that are in that position who, because of the weight and the burden that the economy in this country is putting on them to just survive and get through the day, it's like, I literally have to keep this job and do what they ask me to do, because if I don't, I'm homeless. If I don't eat. If I don't, then my kids don't eat. So, and those, they care just as much. I imagine they care just as much. Yes. But they have to make sure that they're taken care of, and unfortunately, that means following these ridiculous curriculums that they're being given. So, in those cases, we want to provide an opportunity for those educators to teach what they really should be teaching, outside of the classroom. But again, that requires an amount of capacity that not a lot of people have, just because of the day-to-day, obligations that they have. So it really is a position where we are stuck between a rock and a hard place. And the only thing that will really get us out of that position is the community working together to kind of lift that boulder off of our shoulders at the same time.
So here's something that we can do. Here's something that we can offer. And I am willing to, help with this. I'm asking for you guys help with this as well, right? We have the benefit of social media. We have the benefit of creating a community. Like, it's actually called a community on social media. We could create a Facebook community just for teachers who want to supplement those elements of their curriculum. And I will go in and I will add things, and other people can add things. And if you are that teacher who needs your job and you're staying there because of that, if you are that teacher who wants to be a good teacher, but you had never intended to be a teacher, if you are that teacher who is just, you are that good teacher and you want to add, we can have this community where we all contribute to the information, and then you can pick from it and you can take that into your classroom and supplement what it is that you have to actually put forth. Because like I said, I didn't not teach it to my children. I read it to them exactly as it is written in the curriculum standard. We didn't shy away from that. But then there's other things that you can bring to a Socratic circle. There's other things that you can bring to a compare and contrast writing. There's other things that you can bring to it that if you knew what that was, it would be very helpful for you. And we can build a community where we just provide that information for people as a community.
Yeah, I mean, I will do anything I can to help that in terms of promote, use platform, anything I can do, because I am terrified of the idea of more kids growing up not knowing who they are, where they came from, it's extremely dangerous. And it's very, very self-defeating. And it's depressing, actually. So I find that it's sort of like the cornerstone of people is knowing your history. And when people don't have that, it's essentially like being ethnically cleansed. You're erasing somebody's history, and what that does to people is very, very real. That's a real problem. And I think there's a lot of very broken people that ultimately are and have no feelings of who they are or self-esteem based on you have no sense of this. And I think that it's like a vicious circle of oppression.
That's the system.
And not just a lack of knowing who they are, but being told that what they are is inferior to what the majority is, right? I know we've all probably seen the study with the little black girl, and she's given to choice to choose between two baby dolls, one black, one white. It's like, if you can't understand how psychologically that is extremely debilitating for a child to feel like something that is representative of her is less than or not the first choice because that's not what everybody else is getting, then it's kind of it's hard to start a conversation with someone if they can't understand the impact and the severity, the gravity of that kind of psychological manipulation.
It's spirit crushing. It crushes their little spirits.
Well, it's our job to try to rectify that, and you guys have certainly provided a fantastic conversation.
I want to come to the Socratic circle.
Oh.
Please tell me it's not the same as Socratic method in law school, because that's a little aggressive for the.
No, I only even use that terminology because it's something that is very familiar to people in the public school system. So I was kind of speaking to them in that regard.
Because I had some Socratic professors in law school and they were scary. So I wouldn't wish that on you've got littles. You know what I mean? Like I said, I use the language for the teachers in the house, for the public school teachers in the house who know that. Our children don't know that language. And they shouldn't be learning sitting in desks in a row anyway. That's the dumbest thing ever. Who thought that would work?
People who wanted to create
cogs. People want to create cogs in a machine.
Cheryl, CJ, thank you so much. Before you go, please plug anything that you're working on right now, how people can find your work. Obviously, it was a real pleasure having you both on the scene.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. So next Friday, Dream Defenders Broward Squad will be having a paint and sip at the Painting with a Twist in Plantation from 7 to 9. It's completely free. We'll be providing all the materials and all the drinks. It's mocktails though, so.
And is this for a particular campaign or something that you guys are working?
Well, it's the introduction of a campaign that we're going to be working on, but essentially the theme of this particular event is based around our freedom papers, which is our vision for our communities and how we want to, move to what we want to move towards as a community. But it will be talking about our freedom to be, our freedom of mind, and drawing an interpretation of the world that you want to see. So allowing people to just kind of be creative while kind of teaching them a little bit about.
I want to go to that. Wait, what day is that?
Next Friday.
Next Friday, the 29th, from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. at Painting with a Twist. You can find a little bit more information and register going on our Instagram page at Broward Dream Defenders.
Awesome.
Let me put that in there real quick.
And Cheryl, talk about what, I mean, I know that you didn't want to focus on this, but if you want to do any sort of promotion for your school, because I know that things are hard right now for people that are unaware. Schools that rely on state funding for their students are all being held up for like a month or so. And so, right, is that what it's like? And so these schools are not able to function as well as they could.
Right. So 100% of our students are scholarship students. And if you're not aware, the state of Florida, in terms of privatizing education, the students in the state of Florida can apply for what's called a step-up scholarship, and they can use that step-up scholarship to go to any private school that they want. And as of May, they can also use, parents can also use that scholarship money to homeschool their children, thanks to Ron DeSantis and the Florida state government. So not everything is horrible. So homeschooling parents, look up stepupforstudents.com, .org, I'm sorry. And also parents who want to send your children to private schools can look at Step Up for Students. With the change in it, I don't know what's holding up the funds, but private schools who are dependent on those funds, like ours, because 100% of our students are scholarship, we're not receiving them, and they're not coming through. And so we're having to kind of subsist and pay our lease and pay our teachers, and we're not able to do that right now because the funding is being held up.
So how can we help? Do you have a GoFundMe?
So to help with that, and also to help with something super fun, we're not just an African-centered school. We are a project-based school, and we build sizable projects to teach the children that they are creators. Those same creators that were chosen and had those skills before they got here, they are still those same creators. So we build sizable projects. Our children have built electric cars. They have built boats. They have changed one of our walls in our school to a hydroponic grower that they were growing vegetables and leafy greens out of the wall in the school. Sizable projects that we do. So our current project that we are working on, we are turning a 20-foot shipping container into a tiny house, and the children are building this tiny house. So it's going to be in the back of our building, and they go with the help of community organizers and community members to lay the flooring and cut the windows. And
I'm so sorry to interrupt. I really got to go, but it's been a pleasure speaking with you all. Have a great night.
See you, my friend.
So to contribute to helping with their building of their tiny house, you can go to our website. I don't know if you can put the name of the school on the screen because it is a word that is unfamiliar to most people, but New Alkebulan
I have the
Schools.com,
website right here. Hold on.
newalkebulanschools.com. And if you would like to donate, it's newalkebulanschools.com/donate. If you'd like to register your child, newalkebulanschools.com/register. And if you want to see the video of some of the projects that we've already done in terms of them building a car, building boats, building businesses, a publishing company, any of those, we have videos of them making all of those things on our website, newalkebulanschools.com.
That's so nice. I'm so like, thank you so much for coming on. And if you have anything that I can help with in any way, shape, or form, first of all, the idea of building a tiny home is really cool. But if there's anything that we can help with, we generally do. Like, we started as like a volunteer organization, so we do all sorts of service. Actually, that's one of the ways I first started really working with Mo, was we were doing a community garden in Liberia. And that's sort of where we really became close. But so we're always looking to help and do stuff like community stuff. So, always feel free to reach out. It was so nice to meet you.
Awesome. It was nice meeting you too.
Thank you for coming on.
Thank you, Cheryl. A great conversation all around, I would say.
I'm just thankful that there's people like that. And it's sad to me that so many kids are graduating and going through school and not learning the shit that they need to know. Like I didn't, and I don't want that for them.
That, of course, as I said, is deliberate, because ultimately the powers that be want a, what's the term that you use?
They want
cogs in the cogs.
But I'll
in the
tell
machine.
you what's going to happen, because I can tell you as someone who has recently been really, really angered from realizing certain things that I was lied to about. It will come back to bite them in the ass. It will come back to bite you in the ass. Because ultimately people do find out, and all you build is anger and resentment from people not knowing things.
Sure.
I have so much anger, people, about this, like that I just can't even.
Yeah, they can go after one person at a time, but they can't get everybody. And I think that the whole unification, or at least the solidarity movement that's happening right now with labor, is very, very strong. Most people who have been paying attention, as we have, we are obviously huge, huge supporters of labor, and in particular what's happening right now with the United Auto Workers.
I was a little giddy that he met Shawn Fain. I almost wanted to okay, so I was going to message Jordan and be like, did you tell Shawn Fain that I love him?
Yeah, he's Jordan, of all people, was able to secure an amazing interview with the UAW president, Shawn Fain, and he did not pull any punches whatsoever. So you guys are going to get a taste of that right now.
They constantly were told by UAW bosses, live to fight another day.
Oh, yeah.
We got to take this or they're going to close down the plant.
When I hear the phrase, live to fight another day, I want to literally beat the shit out of somebody. We had that embedded in our brains as workers coming through over the years. And it would drive me up a wall when I would hear a leader say, live to fight another day. Another day came and went over and over, and no one fought. And so this is our time. We call this our generation defining moment. This is it. And so, and when I talk about not having limits, throughout my campaign running for this job, and even since then, when we're talking about our issues, when we put our demands out there, I can't tell you how many people would say, oh, you'll never get cost of living back. That's a thing of the past. Why are you fighting for pensions? We'll never see a pension. And all I heard is what we can't do. And unfortunately, that was driven by a leadership that had a can't-do mentality, settling for the bare minimum and making people think that's okay. The sky has to be the limit. We cannot limit ourselves on what we can achieve.
You've been compared to Trotsky.
This man studied Trotsky. I gotta tell you, studied Trotsky before pre-ice picking era.
He's now saying, hey, just shut them down, send them to Mexico, these plants.
I think there's a nuclear option on the table if he's not careful. And that nuclear option is a country called Mexico.
Joe Kernan, who's worth $3 million, that's his salary at CNBC, he said, that's just optics, what the CEOs make. It doesn't really matter. UAW is deploying a, quote, politics of envy by continually hammering the CEO pay.
I'm not hearing a lot of concern about increasing CEO pay, increasing stock buybacks.
But sure, that's just optics. If you take the 20 or 25 or 30 million, that's de minimis for what we're talking about, the success of the company. Maybe optically it looks bad, and it's a politics of envy and everything else.
Are you and the workers just, quote, envious of the CEOs?
I call it a politics of reality. The reality of what our members go through every day. I mean, the majority of our workers are scraping to get by, paycheck to paycheck. I mean, that's not envy. When workers start out at $15 or $16 an hour, and it could take them years as a temp to even get to full-time. If they get to full-time, there's no guarantee they'll get there. If they do, they go to 18, and then they have an 8-year progression to get to full pay. Our members are, this isn't the old Big Three where, it was the gold standard. When you got a job at the Big Three, you were set for life. That's not what this is anymore.
No, it is most certainly not. I love him. I do. I love him. You know what? That is a confident man.
Other labor leaders that are out there that are so-called looking to support working people, they can learn a thing or two from a guy like him. But it also speaks to the fact that, and this is the thing that conservatives, independent-minded people who lean to the right, when they talk about unions, at least for the most part, they talk about unions in the context of they don't view them the same as they view labor. There's no question that not all unions are created equal. There's no question that a lot of union leaders or bosses, you see, that should be the distinction between a union leader and a union boss. Shawn Fain is a union leader. He's not a boss.
And he's constantly referring to members and that it's the members. Like, I've never heard him talk about this from me, mine. I've not heard him say that.
There is no question that he is looking out for his workers, and his workers are dictating the terms of this strike. They have completely thrown GM, Ford, and Stellantis off in terms of how they were going to go about crushing this strike, and it's not working. They were very thorough in how they did this. And listen, I'm not going to stand here and say that Jordan has all of the answers when it comes to the right strategy, but he has been very adamant from jump that what UAW is doing is right, and their approach to this is correct. And there is going to be another round of strikes starting tomorrow.
Keep it coming.
So and this, of course, was a good follow-up conversation to what had happened just a couple of days ago. Ford decided to fire 600 non-striking workers. So they're trying to make they're basically trying to divide and conquer. That's their goal.
Not a good look.
No, it's not. Because most of them, and I'm sure that there was a discussion amongst the ranks that, look, even if we're not striking, we're totally with you on this. We know that you guys are doing what's necessary, so we support you in that endeavor. And so their attitude is, well, let's fire the ones that are not striking and maybe create a rift.
And you know what, though? That might have worked at some point, but not when you've got 75% of the country is standing with the workers. When you've got a country where that many people are standing with the side of labor, that is just not a good look. It's not going to serve them. People are hip to this game already. They get it. The jig is up.
And I'll tell you,
get how much money that the CEOs have made and that they don't let it even affect anybody who works under them.
And this is also a reflection of where the country really is compared to where the powers that be. The ruling class has decided that the American people are just going to accept things as they are. Bernie was at the official launch meeting. Yeah, there were obviously going to be Michigan politicians that were going to be there that we don't agree with, but they're making they're making an appearance, if you want.
I hope
so.
Will. I hope so.
So there is that solidarity that Bernie has instilled in so many of us. That Bernie's greatest achievements in terms of what his movement and in terms of his presidential runs actually meant, obviously bringing key issues, leading with Medicare for all to the forefront. But his emphasis on labor, and standing with labor, that's his greatest accomplishment because of the way people now look at labor in this country. Credit, and we'll obviously talk about John Fetterman in a minute. He drove out to Detroit to stand with the striking workers. Donald Trump is going to visit the striking workers on, I want to say, Monday, I believe. President Biden has yet to confirm that he is going to visit the striking workers. The idea that Trump is going there and once again is giving you multiple days advance notice that he's going to be there to stand with the workers. And Trump might even stand on the picket line, which is even more
That'd be
amazing.
hilarious.
The fact that he's doing that and the president of the United States in a state that he can't afford to lose, mind you.
Oh, he will lose it.
There's no guarantee that he's going to lose.
This is how it will happen.
But the idea that you think that you don't have to go there, that says two things. One, it says, well, it actually says three things. One, President Biden is probably not making this decision. This is somebody else who's making it. They probably don't feel comfortable putting him in this type of a public setting where there is no control whatsoever. That's the thing about Trump that I don't think people realize. Trump could get thrown into the lion's den. He doesn't care.
No.
Like he'll go where it's not, they'll say, Mr. President or Mr. Trump, this is not safe. This is going to look bad for you. This is totally fine. I'll totally handle myself. Whereas with President Biden, he must be in a controlled environment. They don't want to take any chances.
Well, also, I think that there's cognitive issues.
I do think that as well. I don't think that they can afford to put him in that position because that is really going to hurt him politically. However, the idea that he can't so much as make an official statement, won't go on TV, won't just go out, maybe even on a Sunday show, and just say, yeah, man, I totally stand with the workers. You know what they said that President Biden did the other day? He wore a red tie in solidarity with the work. I'm like, it can't be this. That can't be this.
That's like Kente Cloth Tails worthy.
But I refuse to believe that people are this inept politically. I refuse.
Well, that's why I believe that they just don't care. That they don't. It doesn't matter to them. They don't care. Everything is brazen now. They don't even have to be secretive that they don't care. Nancy Pelosi's running again. Lady, if you were any good at your job, we wouldn't be in this mess.
Well, I think it's reflective. Obviously you can't quantify it at that level, but I think all of the money that Nancy Pelosi now has in her bank account is money that was stolen from all the citizens of San Francisco who are now suffering in the streets every day.
Something like that. Well, one way or another, it trickled in that direction. I mean, for people who don't realize where she comes from, she was always a bundler. She was a bundler for the party. She was always about bringing in money. She's a rainmaker. And everybody will tell you, the rainmaker always gets to call the shots.
It's amazing. Wasserman Schultz has been a congresswoman in this district for 2 decades, and it feels like a lifetime. Could you imagine having the same congressional representative for 4 decades?
Well, and you know what? Yes, if they were doing a stellar job.
But who really does a stellar job?
Well, I'm just saying, it's like if somebody was really doing a good job, your work would speak for itself. Your work does speak for itself, Nancy. Your work is all around us. Not a good look.
I think from the perspective of the labor movement, and this is where I think Shawn Fain's power really shines through the most, is that they have given no indication that they have any love for Trump or Biden. And that's kind of where it needs to be. Because if you want to unite the most amount of people in this country, I can't tell you how many people. Listen, there is this perception, and it's so much worse with the Democrats than it is with Republicans. But there is this perception amongst the party loyalist ranks that you're either a Democrat or a Republican. And if you're a Democrat, you're better than you are if you were a Republican. But the fact of the matter is, over half of this country today, and this is just what's on paper, what's in people's hearts and in people's heads is entirely different. I am a registered Democrat and have been for most of my life, but politically, I'm independent. There's no getting around that. My thought process is independent, even if I lean left politically. With that being said, that's the mindset of over half of the electorate in the United States. When we look at the voter rolls and the numbers that come down when the Democratic Party, in particular in Florida, one of their, if not their main prerogative, is to register voters. They're not registering in the Democratic Party, even when it is Democrats that are trying to get them to register. There is an independent streak that is growing very, very strong, ever so subtly in this country. And that's where I think maybe the greatest strength of what Shawn Fain and UAW is doing right now is they are representing workers full stop, not workers in the Democratic Party, not workers in the Republican Party, but independent working class people of this country. That's his greatest strength. And I think that that's the greatest strength of what they're doing right now. Nothing to add?
I don't have anything to add.
All right. So we are going to cover one more story, and that, of course, is...
Apparently we have to talk about Fetterman's hoodie.
Well,
apparently.
We're going to talk about a few things because Senator John Fetterman has been at the center of attention for quite some time for a number of reasons. The guy's 6'8".
He looks like Shrek.
And he weighs over 300 pounds. He is a mammoth of a man.
Yeah.
And he's really a gentle giant who is out there working on behalf of regular people, not perfect by any stretch, and we'll get to Ukraine. The fact of the matter is, he is, in terms of the U.S. Senate, outside of Bernie Sanders, he's as good as you're going to get, and that's not saying a lot. And the idea that they want to create, the GOP in particular, wants to create this scandal, and this is so typical of what goes on the Hill,
exactly?
that he doesn't want to wear suits, that he wants to dress like a regular Joe when he goes to work. But the truth of the matter is, he dresses that way because it's not easy for him to dress in a suit.
No, he's big.
He's really big. He's not just really tall, he's very broad.
He's just big. He'd have to go. Yeah, I get that.
So you can imagine wearing a suit every day.
Yeah, that's not good. No.
You want to say that he should make a better effort and maybe he could, dress like George W. Bush.
Well, at some point, I think also it did become somewhat of a gimmick with the hoodie.
Sure.
And I like I said, I agree with both things. One, I don't really care what he wears, and two, he could do a little bit better.
Well, the attacks that have come on him have obviously been very lowbrow, to say the least. And so he had a moment on the Hill the other day. Actually, I think this was, I could be wrong. This could have actually been this afternoon. I thought it was yesterday, but this was probably this afternoon, where he is talking about, the difficulties, but it doesn't negate the fact that he is able to do his job. There is there's an anti, it's not handicap. It's any deficiencies are seen as an opportunity to attack.
Well, but here's the thing. Let's be clear. Are the same people that are bothered by his wardrobe bothered by Mitch McConnell and Dianne Feinstein and people
policies.
Forget policies. They're not even doing their jobs. They're freezing. They can't. Well, it's like we're running a hospice. And the fact that he's wearing a hoodie shouldn't be the most offensive thing. I'm more offended that Nancy Pelosi is running again at her age than I am about him wearing a hoodie.
So here's what a fake scandal looks like in politics. But here's where Mr. Fetterman brings, the humanity into all of it. So here we go.
This is my iPhone, and this is a transcription service that allows me to fully participate in this meeting and conversations with my children and interacting with my staff. I had a stroke about 18 months ago, and I have lost my ability to fully process language. And I like to think I was an empathetic person, truly. But until that happened, I've raised to a whole different kind of level as well. And it's profound to know, though, that I never really considered that without this kind of technology, I couldn't watch television. And I can't imagine if I didn't have this kind of a bridge to allow me to communicate with other people effectively. And, because I live in a political environment, I was ridiculed and made fun of because I wasn't able to process things sometimes or say things. So I'm so sorry that I'm sure many of you had to go through this kind of thing. I was lucky that I was lucky enough to go through my life, the vast majority of that, without this kind of disability that I have. But again, I can't imagine and how the challenges, and I admire everyone that has to kind of live with these kind of struggles and prevail over them. And the questions that I have is really more of an open-ended kind of question to everyone on the panel. How can we become more empathetic, more responsive, and more effective senators to provide the kind of support and services that anyone in these communities deserve to be a citizen here in our nation?
Fetterman got out of the vehicle that pulled up right in front of the Capitol mid-afternoon as the Senate returned from recess. He was wearing his familiar hoodie and gym shorts.
And that's exactly what's wrong in Washington. We're playing with the livelihoods of millions just so the GOP can just turn the screws against hungry Americans. Yeah, like I truly, I was very proud of my colleagues, because they're really about governance. That's what it is. And on the other, the House, the whatever they call themselves, Team America or whatever they call themselves, I just like, bring your vote. Otherwise, they need to go hump a different leg.
John Fetterman from Pennsylvania, a senator from Pennsylvania.
Hey,
You work with him in D.C.
Drove all the way from Pittsburgh because we're a union town here too, as well. It's just an honor to be here. Yeah.
Oh wow.
I always stand for the union way of life. I live across the street, from a steel mill and the steel workers, and I came from Pittsburgh because it's a union town as well. I will always stand for unions. My message to the CEOs is, at $74 million, collectively earning that, how many yachts can they need,
Ask you about this news that Speaker McCarthy has formally launched an impeachment or has said he's going to.
Oh my God, really? Oh my gosh, it's devastating. Ooh, don't do it. Please don't do it. Oh no.
So we gotta run back to the office, but
So that is so funny to me that he did that. Ooh, I'm so scared. Yeah, the idea of them impeaching him is absurd. I think that when he was doing things other than the white hoodie outfit, for the most part, he seemed to be at least wearing a button-down shirt and some things. But yeah, I think he could do a little bit better. I don't love the shorts and the hoodie in the Capitol. It's not my jam. But of all the things that our Congress does, how he dresses, I don't think it would make my top 1,000 complaints. Like, I really don't. I got some way bigger fish to fry than his hoodies.
Let's get a few things out of the way. One, his ability to speak and form proper sentences has improved 1,000-fold to where he was a year ago. This isn't even up for debate. It's clear that he is, for the most part, recovered.
Yeah, well, no, and he says he still has some effects of disability, but
sure. Well, no, he's perfect. But at the end of the day, where he is he capable of doing his job?
Clearly.
It's clear that he is. So let's just, that doesn't even need to be addressed. You want to say that he can improve upon his decor in terms of his ensemble?
I think he could.
Yeah, I'm sure there's, does it have to be dramatic? Does he have to wear a suit every day? No, not necessarily. It's just not.
But you know what? When I look at somebody and I see them in all those different scenarios, that's somebody really doing their job. So he's actually standing on a picket line with the UAW in solidarity and drove there from Pittsburgh. And I just think that's somebody who's actually representing people and standing with people. So how could you say that's not doing their job when I look at someone like Dianne Feinstein in the Senate? And she's missed how many votes? And she's been in and out of basically cognitive awareness for the past however many years. And nobody's doing anything about that. But we're going to pick on Fetterman and he's recovering or is it I don't know. I think that what they really don't like, and he's a regular guy. They don't like that in their midst.
No. And that's what we put out on social media today, is that Fetterman dresses that way more so because he's representing working people, because that's how they dress. He doesn't dress in a suit and tie and pretend that he's being represented by oligarchs. He represents working class Pennsylvania.
They don't like that.
That's how he won the primary, because the two suits won Pittsburgh and Philadelphia respectively, and he won the rest of the state. And then he won the U.S. Senate because he is a throwback. He is a throwback U.S. senator to what the Democratic Party is supposed to be, which is supposed to be a party of labor. He is representing that core faction.
And he does. Clearly he is. And again, I don't.
For a U.S. senator to represent one of the most, if not the most, consequential swing state in the country right now, and represent it with such complete disregard for not even manners, but just this whole idea that you have to be hoity-toity in the U.S. Capitol when he knows that people are suffering every day in this country. You could act like he was going to Michigan for a photo op. Why would he? He didn't go there with a crew. He just went there because he wanted to be there.
Yeah.
Now, don't get me wrong. I'm going to get to the issue at hand with Fetterman.
And there's nothing wrong with a photo op.
But as long as you're there, as long as you're saying support labor, not ownership, which of course is a huge problem we have in politics. And most of the Democratic Party is not, it's one thing to make a statement. There's the Democratic Coalition and Occupy Democrats and all of these think tank organizations that are funded through DC are all going to say, oh, we stand with labor. Yeah, they'll stand with labor for 24 hours. But when ish really hits the fan, then you'll really see where they stand.
When it starts to, you'll start to know whose stock portfolios are being affected. And when that starts to happen, that's when they're, they change their tune.
100%. Now, where does the problem actually lie with Senator Fetterman? Now, he was doing an excellent job at clapping back at these idiots all throughout social media, giving him the business about you're not dressing properly. I mean, he really knows how to fire back, and it may not even be him. It may be his staff, and they're doing a great job.
No, it's him, and they're it's them, but they've learned it from him, and it's because someone like him, he's been dealing with that his whole life. People not liking how he dresses or what he wears. He has zero F's to give about that.
Now, we didn't freeze frame the last tweet that was put up, but if you guys saw it, it specifically talked about how he called them jagoffs for holding up what could potentially be another, an issue with passing the stimulus bill and being able to run the government properly when, in their mind, the reason that they're holding it up is because of Ukraine. Senator, that's not a flex. In fact, you have the complete opposite of the intended effect. Bragging about funding for Ukraine is not good.
No.
Not good at all.
No.
In fact, it's so bad that you completely defeat the purpose of even attempting to make a point here. Why is that? Well, there's a couple of reasons. Number one, we have given, despite what the numbers on paper actually are showing us, in reality, we've probably given in excess of $1 trillion to Ukraine at this point. To even wrap your mind around that type of money is crazy. That's just one. Number two, compounding interest, which will be in the hundreds of billions before it's all said and done, maybe another $1 trillion.
But and it's very profitable. That's very profitable.
Number three, you just saw on 60 Minutes the other day with Scott Pelley, President Zelensky said, we are not negotiating with Vladimir Putin, which means forever war continues. And if that's not enough, you had a climate march in New York City the other day where tens of thousands of people were in the streets marching for their lives because of the climate crisis. Who's the biggest emitter of carbon footprint in the entire planet?
That would be the military-industrial complex.
And who is responsible for the war in Ukraine? Yes, Vladimir Putin and the military-industrial complex.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing is this is a very profitable situation. And even from Putin's perspective, I mean, again, two things can be true. He can be a bad guy, but what he is an oligarch. In fact, he's the wealthiest oligarch in Russia. So
some say he's the wealthiest oligarch of them all, which could be possible.
So point being that when people say, well, why would he do that? Does he want to take over Ukraine? It's like you're trying to reason capital as if it isn't just its own thing. Like there are people that the war is the thing, right? Like there is no win. Now, they both need to find some sort of like graceful exit, but it's not, Putin, I don't think ever wanted to take over Ukraine. Like that wasn't really the goal. I mean, there's a lot here, people. And unless you know the history going back to at least 2014, preferably 2006 regarding Ukraine, you really don't understand what's going on. And I would suggest people, if you want to know what's going on, Medea Benjamin has a good book out called The War in Ukraine. And it's someone else wrote it with her, and the name is escaping me. And it's very short. It's a brief book. It'll explain to you at least the basic history. Please educate yourselves, people, before hanging a Ukrainian flag in your house, please.
I think a lot of people also don't understand exactly how much military spending Russia actually does compared to the United States.
It's
like 10%.
It's not.
So when you think about the fact that we have, again, on paper, there's no telling how many there really are, but on paper, that we have over 800 military bases on the planet. I believe Russia has like a dozen.
Right,
So,
like it's not even a comparison.
So when you think about how much money we spend in terms of the military, in terms of the military-industrial complex, and what that actually looks like, it's pretty insane. And the amount of waste that goes into it. The fact that you're already hearing the rumblings about BlackRock and Vanguard and what they're up to in Ukraine. Basically, the demolition of this country has been laid at the feet of these mega private equity firms that are going to get all the contracts, that are going to get, this is big business.
It's money. But so
it's big business.
Putin definitely wants to take over Ukraine. He literally said the Nazi regime needs to be taken down. I'm not falling for it. So again, this is where multiple things can be true. I don't think that the intent is to take over all Ukraine. Again, I would suggest reading this book or doing some research into history. However, there is a very large force of Nazis in Ukraine. That's who we're sending the military money to. That's who we're arming. We're arming the Nazis in Ukraine. That's who's fighting against the Russians in the Donbass region. Like, this was a civil war problem prior to Russia's invasion. Like, this has been going on for a long time, and a lot of it has to do with Ukraine and their non-willingness to, adhere to the Minsk II agreement, whatever that one was. Again, like, there is a very big history here. And we also, and us via NATO, are huge proponents of this. There are so many things we could have done to stop this from happening and chose not to. And we continue to choose not to stop this because it's profitable.
And that's also the thing that when somebody points out, whether it's Brian, and we appreciate it, Brian, how much Nazis are in Russia, again, that's not the issue here.
Multiple things are true.
Multiple things are true.
That's what I'm saying. It's not an either or.
The reason why Putin is not intending to occupy Ukraine, nor are any other countries intending to occupy other countries. You want to know why? Because it's not cost effective. Why do you think the Soviet Union collapsed?
Right.
It was too expansive, and they too had an unconscionably large military reach in the world like we do. Why do you think our dollar is fading in terms of its value? We have overextended ourselves around the world. We are the world police. It can't last forever because financially it can't work.
And that's why you see things like BRICS and these things. Like, we're being phased out. We're being phased out.
Trump could get back into the White House on this issue alone. The idea that Trump is saying point blank, the second I get back into the White House, I will broker peace with this war, because he really wants this Nobel Peace Prize. He'll broker peace, and we will no longer be sending hundreds of billions of dollars a month to Ukraine. Do you know how well that plays with the electorate across the board outside of the Ukraine flag-waving Democrats? It's pretty damn positive. So don't deny the reality of where we are. Could you even imagine what would happen if President Biden said we need to send 20,000 troops to the Russia-Ukraine border?
Well, that's what they're getting towards.
Think about how far we're away from that.
Yeah, that's what we're getting toward. Brian, I seriously suggest you get Medea's book or you watch some stuff about the history of what's going on there, because it really is complicated. We draw these lines, these arbitrary lines around plots of land and say to people, okay, now you're a country. But when, a chunk of that country identifies as Russian and part of another country, this is why we have problems in Afghanistan.
Brian,
we're making up countries.
Brian, I'm going to keep it as simple as I possibly can, as I do for everybody when it comes to why do people engage in any type of warfare on this planet? It's very simple. corporate special interests.
And greed.
That is the end of the discussion. Do you know how much rich material
It's uranium.
wealth is in Western Ukraine? In the trillions of dollars, and it's not even uranium alone, it's cobalt, it's wheat, it's so many different resources. This is no different than us going into Iraq, going into Syria, going into Libya, going into Yemen. It goes on and on. This doesn't end. But it's all about the natural resources.
Yes.
And again, there are 3 countries on this planet that decide everything. Us, Russia, and China. It has been that way for God knows how long.
And it's really mostly us because we're the ones that always want to be the world police. You don't like my music. I actually think that, yeah, but the thing is that we're not talking about the fact that huge populations in that chunk of Ukraine and in places like Crimea wanted that, voted for that. That was what they chose. And chose to completely disregard, when I say we, I mean like Western we, European we, NATO we, chose to completely disregard that. So when you say that those people are going to be part of Russia, they wanted that. Again, there is a very complex history here between the eastern part of Ukraine and the rest of Ukraine, and it's complicated. And I think people don't understand, and they just think, oh, the poor Ukrainians. Yes, that's true, the poor Ukrainians. But it isn't.
If there's anyone who needs sympathy in this entire equation, it's the Ukrainian people.
Right, they're just stuck in the
They
middle.
are not only stuck in the middle, they are being led to slaughter. They are going to be killed. You have at least, again, on paper, 500,000 Ukrainians that have been killed already. And you have the president who has no way of winning this war, saying, I will not negotiate with this man. Why don't you see, this is where you know that it has nothing to do, and this goes to Brian and to anybody else in this chat, this is where you know that this has nothing to do with President Zelensky and had everything to do with us and basically NATO, which is our front group. Here's the bottom line. If he attempted to negotiate with Putin, and Putin in the United Nations is basically saying, I need this, this, and this, and he would look like a fool on the world stage, then there is leverage that is created. But they don't want that because that's not the goal here. The goal is to keep this going as long as humanly possible because this is blood money. It is so lucrative. If another 500,000 Ukrainians have to die, so another $1 trillion in money can be printed to be sent to the military-industrial complex, they will do it without hesitation.
Okay, do they want our support? Now, that's an interesting question because the Ukrainian people probably need a lot of aid and a lot of help right now because their country is getting destroyed. That's not who we're helping. Correct. Okay? We're helping their military continue to do this. So we're not helping the Ukrainian people. So do they want our support or not? I don't think they want what we're doing. Okay? Because what we're doing is facilitating the war. If we didn't keep this up, they would have no other means to keep this up. The only reason that they get to fight to the death to the end and doing things that aren't even like, within all sorts of like post-Geneva Convention allowances in terms of like all sorts of war weapons and stuff. Like they wouldn't be able to do that if we didn't allow it.
Statistical analysis dictates. And again, this is from an American populace that is completely ignorant, woefully ignorant to the realities of our foreign policy.
Please research the history.
We are only given a very small percentage of information in terms of what's actually going on. But you know what can't be denied? The overwhelming majority now believes that this is a pointless exhibition. Whatever this is going to lead to is only going to lead to more death and more profit for the richest people in the world. And that is it.
It's not going to.
That is it.
Yeah.
So when you hear who I have been saying since January 20th, 2021, President Blinken, when he goes on TV and tells you that the Russians are on the run and the Ukrainians are winning, he is a mouthpiece for the military-industrial complex in NATO. That is what his role is as the Secretary of Defense. But in reality, he is really calling the shots. If the President of the United States was really calling the shots, he'd be the one out there saying it. Instead, you have President Blinken saying what he's saying. And do not, ever, under any circumstances, say that you care about the environment and you care about where this planet is going and support this stupid, endless war, one of many that are still going on, but just the one that's up top of mind right now.
Yeah.
Because nothing is pillaging and destroying this planet more than this. And the ecological, environmental, and economic destruction of the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. You can't even begin to wrap your head around that. And for any nincompoop out there who thinks that Russia did this to sabotage themselves, this is how they trade their oil to Europe and other parts of the world. Do not buy into the propaganda that is sold here. And I have no doubt that Russia sells stupid propaganda to their own people.
Of course. But again, it's another oligarchy. It's not like they're no longer communists, right? They're just another capitalist. They're just a less rich version of us. That's all. So, they're wrong, we're wrong. Multiple things can be true. There's a lot of other horrible things.
Ryan, you're never going to hear from working class Ukrainians who want no part of this, which makes up 90 to 95% of the country. The power of propaganda.
We're not helping the Ukrainians.
Is so real. The power of what really goes on. There was I don't remember when this video was taken, but it was of Anderson Cooper who went to a spot where it was like flooding, but you could see that where he was standing was in very shallow water, and they made it look like he was really in sinking water. This is the power of propaganda. It is to convince you that what is going on in select places, it's like us in this political bubble that we live in every day, where we think that what we're talking about here is what the average person is talking about. I guarantee you, if you go into your neighborhood and knocked on 10 doors, you might get one that actually is paying attention to any of it, even a fraction of this. The other 9 couldn't care and wouldn't pay attention because it isn't what is allowing them to live any type of fulfilling life. So knowing the effects of what this represents is why this is so important to talk about, because Fetterman is popular. And for him he was on fire all week, but he wants to end the week with talking about we need to pass the spending bill so we could get more money to Ukraine. Come on, John. And even you know that's not true.
I don't know. Like, where is he? I don't get it. And the other thing we haven't talked about at all is the Libya nonsense, like what we did to contribute to that. Jeez, there's thousands of people missing there right now. Oh, by the way, we just have to be in everybody's business. We just have to be in everybody's business.
That's the whole.
So Africa is seriously wanting the white people to leave, the Euros to leave. They want us to leave. They said leave. And we said, nah, we're going to stick around.
Yeah.
And France is worse, but it's the same thing. It's like, this doesn't end well.
Now, let me tell you something, guys.
Russia's not sitting there.
The best thing that we have going right now, I have to say, the one thing that you can say that is a real silver lining to the America, I don't want to call them the MAGA movement because that's just, it's meant to be derogatory, but you want to call it the America First movement, I'll give them that. They are adamant about not getting involved in foreign wars. And I still maintain that one of the biggest reasons they don't want to be involved in them anymore is because a lot of their family and friends were involved in the war in Iraq, and they saw what an absolutely useless, futile war that actually was. I mean, I dated a girl who deployed, got married, had 2 kids, and her husband was killed on his 3rd tour in Iraq. And she will never be the same again for the rest of her life. And she's a conservative. And you better believe that she is like many others who don't want any part of this stuff anymore. So, silver lining in that regard, to say no more war. Now, are there opportunists that are out there that are going to say it, like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Ted Cruz and Mr. Pencil Neck himself, Tom Cotton? Yes, there's always going to be those. But in terms of the movements, the people on the ground, that I think is the greater lesson here to be learned. There's always going to be fighting over raw materials. That's not going to stop. But that's also a reflection of how far gone our economic system really is in this country. The fact that we still have to do battle with big oil, that we are not evolving to carbon neutral energy consumption. And yes, I am a proponent of nuclear power. Solar, wind farms, hydropower, geothermal. There is so much out there that can be incorporated that doesn't involve coal and natural gas. Now again, granted, not everything is a final solution, but we must reduce what we're doing, and we must reforest the planet. There's a lot of things that we could be doing, but as long as we're dropping bombs, no, I am not saying vote for Trump, de freak. That's not what I'm saying at all. But one also has to recognize.
That's what they got from that.
Yeah, but one also has to recognize exactly where things are moving. And so I think over time we'll look back on this and realize that we were had again.
Well, I'm not going to say we.
Well, no.
Also, I would like to say I wasn't had with Iraq ever. I had never been had with Iraq. I always knew that was bogus. I always knew weapons of mass destruction was not. I always knew that. I knew it was bogus then.
I was a sophomore in college in a lecture hall at a college I won't name. My point is, I'm sitting there and I'm literally listening to fellow students say we have to go into Iraq and give them their freedom. You really have no idea how easy it is to manipulate the masses. It's so easy.
Yeah.
And a movie that I still haven't seen, but I need to see, that I would recommend everybody see.
You haven't seen it, so how can you recommend it?
Well, Network apparently is.
Yeah, but you don't recommend movies you haven't seen.
Okay, well, I'm going to see Network and then I'll recommend it to
There
everybody.
you go.
We do not have and listen, thank you, Brian. Thank you. You don't like music, The Freak, Travers, Metalopoly, everybody. It's always great to have a lively conversation. And remember, the goal here is not to agree on everything.
No. But please, guys, do the research, know the history. Don't just look at what happened. If you're looking at Ukraine from the minute of Russia invading Ukraine, you're really not seeing the big picture. And I would suggest that people do their research. That's all I'm saying. Know the nuance, know the history. It is not what we're being told it is.
Agreed.
Just like weapons of mass destruction.
So we do not have a set schedule yet coming up, but we want to let you guys know in advance. We will have a special afternoon show on Monday, October 2nd. We will be interviewing former presidential candidate and endorser of Jen for Congress, Andrew Yang, will be coming on to talk about his book, The Last Election.
Which you've read.
Which I've read, cover to cover. And his co-author, Stephen March. And
it's only fair because I read the last book that he wrote, and I also read the one that the campaign manager wrote. So
we have an egg. We go back and forth. And so I would definitely say that is The Last Election it's a quick read. It's a couple hundred pages, but it definitely, I almost feel like it's a confession book. Like that's what I would take away from that book, is that a lot of what is said in that book talks in great detail about what it's like working on the campaign trail, not necessarily on a third-party campaign, but just campaign in general, which is really good. And it speaks to the fact that there is this great awakening that's happening in this country right now. And people, once they're awake, can't go back to sleep. You're not going to afford, and this is why the Democrats are going to lose to the Republicans, because the Republicans know how to placate the anti-establishment fervor in this country much better than the Dems do. The Dems are convincing themselves that they really can put the cat back in the bag. You can't do it. Remember, the only reason Biden became president was because Trump lost due to a once-in-a-century pandemic.
The Freak, first of all, it's kind of funny that you identify as Democrat. I mean, technically, we are registered that way, but we don't really affiliate with the party. Like, we don't really participate with them. And yeah, I mean, I'm definitely American. I was born here, and I don't hate everything about this place, but I do think that the powers that be are trying to create a world of tyranny for the rest of us. And that is unfortunately what a lot of us are being stuck with. We're being ruled by a minority.
Brian, I think you're really underestimating the direction that this country is going in right now in terms of wanting to break. Again, outlier elections like what just happened up in New Hampshire, with the GOP losing like a plus 12 seat, it's not going to matter the closer you get to the realities of where the major change is going to come. Remember, it's like running a political campaign. Most people don't really make a decision until the last minute. Are there people who decide way in advance? Yes, people who are in the Democrat Party and the Republican Party, and that's it. They will make their decision way in advance. They already know what they're going to do. But the overwhelming majority of this country is now independent. And they're going to sway one way or the other, even though statistically it says that Trump is winning and he's winning in swing states. Now, if you were going to ask me right now what I would be predicting based on the states that you're putting out there, what I would put in what column if the vote was held today, North Carolina, Arizona, and Georgia are going to Trump, and Michigan is going to Biden. Pennsylvania's a toss-up, and Wisconsin is a toss-up. And if Trump wins probably either one of those states, he's going to be the president. So to me, that's where the election, that's what it's going to come down to. And the reason I say in particular regarding Georgia is because Florida, I think people really underestimate the fact that Florida is now a red state. Florida has not been a red state in over 35 years. Like this is, you're going back to the days of Reagan and Bush 1 that this state was red. This state had been blue, leaning blue, swing blue for a long time outside of the governorship. It's not like that anymore. Now it's all red across the board. And that's 30 electoral votes. You know what that means? That's tens of millions of dollars in ground game ad campaigns that are no longer going to be spent here in the state of Florida because the election's been decided. So you know where that money's going? It's going to Georgia first, and then it's going to go to other places like Arizona and Pennsylvania. That's real. Texas is not flipping. California stays blue. New York stays blue. And so everything in between is where the battleground is going to happen. Arizona is very likely, not a guarantee, anything's possible, but Arizona is likely to flip back in the other direction. Remember, Katie Hobbs, who was the Secretary of State, pulled the same bullshit that Governor Kemp pulled in Georgia, where she was running duly in that position when she shouldn't have been. There was a lot of anger. And again, don't forget the economy. The economy is not doing well.
No, it's bad.
This idea that the economy, Biden's doing a good job. No, he's not. Because economically, the change that needed to happen was almost a radical shift to the populist left, and we have done anything but that. In fact, we have not only stayed in the middle, we're slightly to the right, which is even worse. That's why Trump is having a chance to get back in there again. And that's it. You will come on election night, Brian, because who knows where we'll be on election night. It could be an interesting time. My point is, if push comes to shove, one is going to recognize that you really need substantial change in this country right now, and we're not getting it. And one way or the other, we're going to get pushed in that direction.
Metalopoly wants me to address the Russell Brand situation. I can address the Russell Brand situation.
Let's not address it tonight, because obviously there's no point in addressing the Russell Brand.
I just want to address one part of it. The only part of it that matters to me is I am a free speech person.
So am I.
Right.
Yeah.
So the deplatforming, the demonetizing, all of that stuff, that's bullshit. I don't support any of that. Okay. Now, as to what the criminal charges, I haven't seen the complaints. I haven't seen the witnesses. I don't know. And it doesn't matter. What matters to me is that he was deplatformed. Or demonetized rather, and I don't agree with that. I'm never going to agree with that, and I do think there's a lot of political goals here.
The fact that the UK Parliament just tried to lobby Rumble to kick Brand off of their platform tells you all you need to know.
This is, again, I don't know.
And I've been quiet about it from the beginning. I'm like, let things play out. If there's evidence that he did something, give women the opportunity to prove their case.
Absolutely. I believe victims. Like, again, I haven't seen I don't know what it is, but it definitely needs to, the timing of this compared to the timing of the allegations. It's very interesting. Yeah. Like, there's just a lot of political factors at stake. And I know how slimy it is behind the scenes with that, just because we've been demonetized. Like, I just know how this works. So again, now as far as the criminal stuff, I have to wait and see. I don't know what to think of that.
That's why you have to let things play out. You can't just jump on it until this comes to pass. Last thing I'll mention before we go, Brian, did you see Trump's interview the other day when he talked about abortion? Trump is not going to sign an abortion ban. In fact, the results of him allowing the Supreme Court to 86 Roe v. Wade has now put it back in the hands of the states. And when the states are voting on this issue, they are overwhelmingly voting in favor of a woman's right to choose. Trump is in favor of the right to choose. He's also in favor of winning. Whereas somebody like DeSantis, who made the critical mistake of thinking that I am going to go as far as possible with basically an outright ban, and he has completely destroyed his presidential aspirations. You know, he's in 5th place now in New Hampshire. That is amazing. That is incredible. That fall from grace. And let me tell you, if he didn't make, everyone's like he's going to end up being the next Jeb Bush. And in reality, he is the next Jeb Bush, but it was self-inflicted. It was never going to be like this. His decision to do what he did by essentially banning abortion, he threw away his presidential aspirations completely.
Yeah.
Now I just hope that he runs for the Senate against Rick Scott. That would be great.
Yeah. Yeah. Look, if it comes, if there's a criminal proceeding and Russell Brand is, duly convicted, that would be disappointing.
Yeah.
And that's possible. I mean, I don't know enough about the criminal situation, but regardless of that, like we put that is a completely separate issue from him being demonetized. And as far as him working with Disney, Disney's filthy. Disney's basically mafia with a Mickey Mouse face on it. Disney's been filthy forever. So it actually does make perfect sense that he would represent Disney if he were in fact those things. He's been very candid about his addiction, about his promiscuity. He's never not admitted to all of that. So the question is it consensual? And that remains, I don't know. But I do think that there is definitely a lot of reasons that they don't like Russell Brand.
Well, what's the saying about flying too close to the sun?
Yeah. He got very big, and I think he is somewhat controversial. Not to me. Like, to me, I get where he's coming from a lot. He doesn't bother me in the least. And I also I don't know. I just feel like...
Here's the difference, though, with Brand. Unless it's a criminal case, and I don't know what the statute of limitations is in the UK and what they're trying to do, but when it comes down to it, monetarily speaking, I don't think he gives a damn at all because he's got a lot of money.
No, but someone who made a really good point about this, as per usual, is Kim Iverson.
About the employees, right?
Yes.
Yes. So
and that's the thing. So, and Russell Brand, like she said, he'll be fine. But this does affect his employees that do run the show and do that. And it's unnecessary to do so, certainly at this point. That's why you have to think it's somewhat politically motivated. Because the fact that you would demonetize him without any, not that it's a criminal situation where they have to see beyond a reasonable doubt, because you don't. But it's really being used politically, regardless of whether or not the accusations are true. It's being used politically. That's how I see it. And I am averse to people being demonetized.
Yeah, this is the thing that I think Nelson makes a good point on, is that evidently, this was like apparently a known thing that Russell was, a skirt chaser of the highest order.
Oh, yeah.
And probably involved himself in situations, whether it was an actual rape or
he,
assault,
of course, has come out and very flatly said that he admits to all of the promiscuity and that everything was consensual. And that is the concern. Like, I don't care how promiscuous he was. That's between him and whoever he was promiscuous with, right? Like, that's not the issue. So I think that it's weird that this is coming up now when someone has been so open about their drug usage, their addiction, their promiscuity, their all of that. And then years and years and years go by, and now he's being accused of these things that are non-consensual. I just think it's weird. It's not like he ever denied the things.
And even and let's just say, for the sake of argument, that it's true that he did sexually assault or even rape these individuals. The actions of the powers that be is only helping his case and the people who support him, and completely looking at it from the perspective of, we have a ruling class that can basically take people out whenever they want. And again, that's not to suggest that it's not real, but this is the reality of what ends up happening. Do you remember when they accused Julian Assange of rape? And then, of course, it turns out it was bullshit. I'm not saying it's the same thing. It's not. But there is nuanced context to the actions that will be taken in order to take somebody down.
I
Whatever
find
is,
it, to me, it's suspicious when it's timed like that. And again, I will have to see what victims, people come forward and what they say and how it's been, but it is very strange to me that this happened so many years ago by someone who has admitted those behaviors, but now you're claiming it wasn't consensual. Like, it just seems suspicious to me. That's all. Well, no, but that's different. She talked about it all along. The only reason that's different. She talked about it then. She talked about it all along. That was an attack that happened to her. And and here's the other thing. Russell Brand is not being appointed to the Supreme Court. Russell Brand isn't running for office. Russell Brand has a platform and a business, and you're like, those are unrelated things. I don't expect Russell Brand to live up to the highest standards of jurisprudence and judicial conduct. I don't expect that of Russell Brand. He would probably laugh at the idea of that. He's always been pretty open as to who he is and what he is. He's a comedian and a movie person. He's not running the government, and he's not seeking to sit on our Supreme Court. Also, what we're talking about with Christine Blasey Ford, she did come, all of that stuff, she was hesitant. The only reason she came forward was because he got to that point, and it's like, this is stuff people should know about. But what is Russell Brand? It's apples and oranges. You know, I would not want Russell Brand sitting on my Supreme Court, if that makes you feel any better.
And the one thing that people did say the other day, which I agree with 100%, and this is again the whole thing about respecting the rule of law. Are you innocent until proven guilty, or are you guilty until proven innocent? And we're living in a world today where people do believe that you are guilty until proven innocent. And that's happening to somebody with power, with money, with means. This happens all the time.
See, now, and if he does, let's say he gets convicted and a jury of his peers says he did those things, okay? Then I can choose whether or not I want to support him as an entertainer or a commentator, as to what I choose to watch and don't watch, or whatever it is. Like, then that would be my choice as to whether or not to do that. But I don't see enough evidence that warrants just coming out and demonetizing someone because you heard some things.
Yeah.
We got demonetized and we don't even know what that's about. So it's hard for me, given my position, to not see that that's how this works sometimes. The timing of it's very suspect.
Yeah.
And if there are victims, I need to see the story. I need to see the evidence.
Bottom line, let's see if they actually move forward with something, or if the intent was basically just to threaten him and knock him off his perch from a financial standpoint.
But it's only really hurting his employees.
Correct.
Because and that, just like all these types of things, like sanctions and embargoes and all of these kinds of blockades, all these things only affect the real working people. You're not going to really hurt Russell Brand.
No, and he'll survive this, if you will.
Oh, for sure. He was surviving it fine up until a couple years ago, just fine, before he had this many followers.
But
right?
the sad reality is that this story completely divided along partisan lines. If you just look at what's written on social media, my attitude is, let the justice system play itself out, if that's what's going to happen. When the judge, jury, and executioner is one that decides whether you have bread or not, without evidence. Again, could there be evidence? Yes, but nothing's been proven. There is no court case. There is nothing. There is just, he did this, believe me, let's go.
And you demonetize. Like, I find it scary. I don't like that at all. That's not, I don't support that stuff.
And so, and here's what I'm going to, and we'll end here. But one thing that I think a lot of people need to remember, and I've always said this regarding whether or not the allegations were true against President Biden. Tara Reid said very specifically that if you want the proof that I'm not lying, there is a sealed file at the University of Delaware archives that they refuse to release. Release that file and you'll get your truth. She's telling you where it's at and how to get it, and they won't release it.
Of course.
You know why they won't? Because the truth is probably what she said. And that's how you know. And that will be the same for a lot of other people that will come forward and say what they're going to say.
Yeah, I'm gonna need some evidence. I really am.
Something.
And yes, I do tend to believe it. I will generally err on the side of believing victims when it's fresh, when it's current. But when you're coming this many years later with all of these circumstances, yeah, we're going to need to see. I'm going to need to see.
And
some
that's where, like you
evidence.
said, the significance of the Kavanaugh situation is the fact that he was trying to become the most powerful judge, or one of the 9 most powerful judges in the world.
And by the way, the demeanor, and here's what he's disqualified as far as I'm concerned. He disqualified himself just from his demeanor. Just his, well, but his demeanor during those hearings. He was just like, looked like a belligerent alcoholic with rosacea. And you know, it was absurd. And, you know, that's the thing. It's like Russell Brand isn't that, and nor is he aiming to be in a position of power over the policy of our entire nation.
And one last thing, you don't like what evidence? You don't like my music other than victim testimony? Let me tell you something, you don't like my music. One of the things that does tend to happen many times when women are sexually assaulted, raped, etc., generally speaking, especially in the very soon aftermath of when it happens, somebody in their trusted confidence hears about it in some capacity. It could be a text message. It could be a letter. It could be written in a journal. But generally speaking, there is something that is linked directly to that circumstance that says that I was a... They don't even necessarily, and you know this, especially with the Jane Doe cases, they don't even necessarily name who the person is, but they'll tell you that something terrible happened to me. You know who told somebody that something terrible happened to them? Tara Reid told her mother that something terrible happened to her by a very powerful person, and her mother proceeded to call in to Larry King in 1993, and it's on video that this actually happened.
Yeah.
You see, that's when you know that there's something there. I guarantee you that if anyone that has been in the presence of Brand or went through something of this nature, there's also the circumstance where they may ask their friend, this happened to me. I'm not sure if I was assaulted or not, but I don't feel right about what happened to me. Something's wrong. There's always some shred of evidence. Something's always there.
And I again, timing. Timing speaks volumes to me. And I don't know. And here's the thing is that, you know, we're not talking about whether or not I believe them at this point. That's a separate issue. At this point, we're talking about I don't believe he should be demonetized. At this point, that's it. But I'm, you know, I don't. That's not my thing.
And of course, the central focus of everything when it came to somebody like Brett Kavanaugh was about Christine Blasey Ford, but in reality, he had no business on that court in the first place.
Right. He's completely uncalled.
And it's unfortunate that it takes a woman coming forward saying that she was sexually assaulted when in reality, he was handpicked from the Heritage Foundation.
And that didn't matter anyway that she came forward.
And he was complete. No, and ultimately it didn't matter because they voted on partisan lines. And at the same time, you had a person who clearly from his disposition couldn't handle himself. And above everything else, he had never tried a case. You're putting somebody on the highest court in the world and he's never tried a case before. Like, you know, the system's broken at that point.
It's
like, you
just
have
not
to
right.
know that it is. So, yeah. So we got into a whole Russell Brand conversation. You know,
Well, to me, it's just a matter of the speech issue and the censorship and trying to deplatform and trying to even just demonetizing. It's just not, I don't support that.
I agree. Guys, thank you so much. Teresa, DeFreak, Metalopoly, Brian, Travers, Chris, Nelson, all of you guys, smash that like button, share, subscribe, do all those wonderful things that we ask you to do ever so nicely. We'll be out canvassing this weekend, football, and of course, we'll see you Monday.